Bold predictions are back. I think this is version 5.0, and they just keep getting saucier and saucier. Let's dive right in here. The first of the bold predictions that you folks claim you would bet your own hard-earned money on has to do with the Fighting Volunteers, the Fighting Collins of Tennessee. Matthew says, how bold would it be to assume Tennessee can win the East and make it to the SEC title game this year? Glad you asked. That is an 8 on the boldness scale, an 8, 1 to 10. There are two things you have to sell me on. This is not totally impossible, but you got to sell me on two things. The first is, how's Tennessee going to Georgia and beating Georgia? Because I think that has to happen here. Absent Georgia dropping 2 games elsewhere, which I don't think is going to happen, that would have to happen. So sell me on Tennessee beating Georgia in Athens. Then we're not done. That would be monumental enough. Part 2 is you have to sell me on then Tennessee finishing no worse than 7-1 in conference play. So they can only drop 1 game even if they beat Georgia, because I don't think Georgia's dropping another conference game. Now that's an assumption that I think we all would have to assume, okay? So it doesn't sound monumental. If you go beat Georgia, you think, okay, we can still drop another game. Well, you know you play Bama every year. And you've also, on the conference slate this year, have Florida. They go to LSU. Like I said, they've got Bama. They got Kentucky. They got Missouri. They go to South Carolina. And they go to Vanderbilt. Why not? So you got to sell me on both those things. You could. That's why I said 8, not 10. Like I said the other day about Georgia in a follow-up year to a national championship. We've seen it with Ohio State, Bama. We've seen it with all of them. Stranger things have happened. So let's put that at an 8. Some things to look out for. You know, there are 15 starters returning from last year's squad. Hendon Hooker, probably the most important there. They also picked up Brew McCoy from the transfer portal the other day. Big-time receiver out of USC. So just keep an eye on the Vols. They're a very interesting program this year. SEC East winners, a little bold. Not the most bold thing we've ever had proclaimed on the show, though. Next up, this one is probably the most popular bold prediction over the last decade. Texas in the college football playoff. This is a solid 8 for me as well. 18th in points per game nationally last year. So offense was there, defense nowhere to be found, especially in the big moments. They've added Quinn Ewers. They've overturned 40% plus of the roster via the transfer portal and recruiting and whatnot. So you see some of the expected offensive contributors if you're watching on YouTube. Bijan Robinson's there. He's probably going to make a run at a Heisman Trophy appearance this year. So yes, offense is not what I'm concerned about at all. They got Bama in week 2. Keep in mind what the prediction is here. Texas makes the playoff. They got Bama in week 2. They're going to be a sizable underdog in their own building in that one. But what also concerns me is that stretch in consecutive weeks. They go to Texas Tech. It will not be an easy out. Don't think otherwise. At Texas Tech, West Virginia versus Oklahoma and Dallas, Iowa State at home, and then at Oklahoma State. Those are consecutive. Then they got a bye week, and they go to probably the Big 12 dark horse's backyard in Kansas State. So they got Baylor at the end of the year, too. This is not an easy schedule. I know some people in the SEC or Big Ten may look and say, oh, I'd trade mine in a heartbeat for that. Well, first off, if you're in the Big Ten West, you wouldn't. Secondly, you're not. This is Texas. This is them. So I think this is an 8. And also, think about this. This is a trend in the wrong direction. I had Jesse recite to me their record. What's the trend over the last few years? 2018, 10 wins. Hashtag we're back. 2019, 8 wins. Not so back. 2020, 7 wins. 2021, 5 wins. So you're telling me we're going 10, 8, 7, 5 all the way up to the playoff? I don't think that happens over the span of 1 year. So I'm going to put that in an 8. Next up, a statement even bolder than the previous two, at least in my mind. Notre Dame wins out in Marcus Freeman's first year. Undefeated Irish team. This is a 9 bordering on a 10. This is just not going to happen. Firstly, because of who they play in week 1, they go to Ohio State. So I would call it a 9 if you just said they're going to go beat Ohio State. So I guess this may be a 10 for me overall. Notre Dame has not had an undefeated season since 1988, to make clear how bold this prediction is. Secondly, this schedule it's tough because most Notre Dame schedules are. That's one of the biggest misnomers in college football. Notre Dame's not in a conference, so Notre Dame has an easy schedule. They don't. They never do. That's just a total myth. They go to Ohio State in week 1. They go to North Carolina later in the year. They got Brigham Young the week after that. They got Stanford the week after that. Clemson, USC also on this schedule. Boston College is not going to be an easy out the week before they go to USC. They got a game in Las Vegas. They got a game in Baltimore. This is not a slate that, with all due respect, the Irish, with a new quarterback in Tyler Buckner, pending health, is going to run the table on. This is not going to happen. So that's a 9 or even a 10. And also, what is the meat of the roster? In other words, if we go back to the recruiting rankings, mainly from 2018, 2019, and 2020, because that's the true senior and junior-laden meat of the roster. They were 12th in the country in 2018. They were 15th in 2019, and they were 18th in 2020. Those aren't bad classes, but those also are not classes indicative of a nucleus that's about to run the table here in a head coach's first year. I don't buy that. A good team, but not equipped to go undefeated. Now, the next thing's not nearly as tall a task to pull off. Nebraska goes bowling. That's what we're looking for in Lincoln these days. This is a 4 to me. This is not bold, not overly bold at least. No bowl game the past 5 seasons for Nebraska. How rare is that, you might ask? Well, the last time they went 5 consecutive years with no bowl appearance was the 50s, like the Eisenhower administration, I think that would have been. He's on the dime. He's on currency. That's how long ago that was. So it's not been much to write home about, but I think also one of the most famous stats in college football right now, if you follow it at a hardcore level, is the whole 3-9 wasn't really 3-9 for Nebraska last year. On one hand, yes, you lose 9 games, you lose 9 games. But as it relates to predicting the upcoming year, they were 3-9 last year and 0-8 in one-possession games. And the other loss was by 9 points. So just out of the realm. They're almost 0-9 in one-possession games. How much better do they have to be? I was talking about this on the Late Kick Extra Pod yesterday too. How much better do they have to be? It could be that Nebraska brings back a team totally equal to last year's and they win 7 or 8 games, at least 6 games, by the nature of nothing more than the ball bouncing their way. Like that many close losses, it's almost hard to pull that off. Like that's one of those reverse luck trends that just cannot carry over year to year. So anyway, if we look at their schedule, they do not play Ohio State in the regular season. They do not play Penn State in the regular season. They don't play Michigan State in the regular season. They got a game at Michigan late in the year. That 4-game stretch to end it. Minnesota, at Michigan, Wisconsin, at Iowa. I would strongly advise Scott Frost to already have found 6 wins. Luckily, he has Northwestern, North Dakota, Georgia Southern. We got Rutgers, Indiana, Purdue, Illinois. Like there are easily 6 winnable games there. Casey Thompson has transferred in from Texas. That's your presumed starting quarterback here. Also, the Big Ten has a number of bowl tie-ins. So if they can get to 6 wins, we don't have doubts about whether they're going to make a bowl. They've also got the 12th ranked portal class. So I think we're going to be able to find 3 more wins here. This is a 4 on the boldness scale for me. I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world. Lastly, we're going to the Big Ten here, and this is something that I want you ahead of the curve on. When Preview Magazine season rolls around, you're going to hear this a lot more. But it's May right now. So I want you to adopt this mentality with me so that we're ahead of the Preview Magazine culture. Daniel is predicting Purdue to make the Big Ten championship game. Now you're thinking to yourself, what? Well, keep in mind, the Big Ten has that whole unequal division set up to where it's very possible. Like someone has to make it from the West every year. It's kind of the general rule or joke, running joke in the Big Ten. No team from the West has won the Big 12 or the Big Ten since 2012. And if you exclude Wisconsin from the equation, there hasn't been a team from that division that's won it, what, Jesse, since they went to the format. It's crazy. So anyway, they were 9-4 last year. They kind of sort of beat Tennessee in the bowl game. That's as far as I want to go there. There's a great big asterisk to me next to the ending of that game. Either way, good season for Jeff Brom and the Boilermakers last year. This year's schedule is a travesty, but it's not their fault, and they should not apologize. This is how uneven the Big Ten is right now. Purdue does not play Michigan. Purdue does not play Ohio State. Purdue does not play Michigan State. They do play Penn State, but they get them at home to start the year, and that's about it. They don't draw anything else with so much as a pulse from the opposite division over there. Now, yes, Lance and anyone else listening, I know they don't have Rutgers there either, so I did not disrespect Rutgers. Point being, this is the most workable schedule for any Power 5 team, especially in the Big Ten. Also, what are we talking about here? We're talking about making the Big Ten championship game, not winning it. They just have to make it there. This is very seeable. This is a 5 for me on the boldness scale. Purdue, you hear them and you don't think contender. It's very important to understand the context. We're talking about making it to Indianapolis. Oh, they could absolutely make it there. So that's a 5 and no more on the boldness scale for me.